Welcome to this local church learning session that will help you and your church understand usage and copyrights and what licenses you need to obtain to live stream worship and other events. This video is part of a series of learning sessions that are aimed to help your church in using technology to connect with your congregation and community, even when you're not able to be physically present together. Something that is timely right now, but should still be useful in the future, as we should all be intentional on reaching new people in new ways. My name is Stephen Adair. I'm the Director of Local Church Services at United Methodist Communications, and I'm joined today with Diana Sanchez-Bouchon, Director of Music Ministries at Discipleship Ministries. So let's dive right in. Diana, why is it important to think about copyrights and obtaining appropriate licenses for churches?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thinking about copyrights and obtaining appropriate licenses has to do with two things, in my opinion. One is we want to stay within the framework of the legal system. We want to do things right and be legally correct according to the laws around copyright and around property that is creative property. That's the second point too, is that we want to make sure that our poets, our composers, all the people who give us the things that we sing are treated fairly. And the way we treat them fairly is that we pay for their work. This is their livelihood. And I know right now we are talking a lot about artists and musicians around our country and around the world who are struggling because they're not being able to perform in front of audiences and so forth. Well, here we have in our hymnals, in our songbooks, songs that were created for our use, but it's part of a person's livelihood. So we need to consider the copyrights and obtaining the licenses which continue to pay those artists their just due for the work that they give so that our church can enjoy worshiping God and praising God with beautiful songs and hymns in our worship spaces.
Awesome. It's very important, very important. So Diana, what are the basic licenses needed for a church, and where do you get those, and how much do they cost?
Well, that's a good question. So the basic license, we need two at this point in time. Around 2010, 2011, CCLI and OneLicense.net started coming out with giving us permissions once we bought the license to put words up on the screen, because more and more of our churches were using screens. And so when you buy songs for the praise band, and then we put the words up on the screen, in order for that to be legal, we have to buy a license in order to do that. We've had hymnals and songbooks in our congregations, and when we use those, we've already purchased those for use in worship. We can put some of those songs in bulletins because we already have the songbooks, but new material that a lot of our churches are using for modern worship and contemporary worship, where only the band buys that material for their use, we have to pay a license for that. So that was the basic, that's where we started. And then we went into streaming. And streaming broadens our audience, as you well know, to a much, much greater group of people. So now when we take our worship and take these songs, we need a streaming license, a license that allows us to put this up on the web using Facebook Live, using Zoom, using all the means that we have right now to go. So we need a license. And again, the licenses protect the people who created the songs that we are using. It also protects people who are creating new liturgies. The liturgies that we've been using in the United Methodist Book of Worship and the United Methodist Hymnal are there for our use in Methodist churches already. But the newer things that are copyrighted, those things are then allowable to be used because we have a license. Now you have to be careful with those licenses and make sure that you're buying the right license for your church. And by that I mean that not all songs are covered in any one license. CCLI and OneLicense.net does cover the bulk of our United Methodist hymnal and the Faith We Sing. So you don't need both of them, but they cover the bulk of those, each one. But they don't cover everything. So you do have to go there and look once you buy the license to make sure that the songs that you're putting up on live stream are covered. So price, pretty much onelicense.net and CCLI, the two main ones, are very similar in pricing, and it's all done by church size. So the majority of our churches in the United Methodist Church tend to be 50 to 100 in attendance. And so for CCLI, a yearly license is $133 for that size group. And then it's an additional $66 for the license fee. But right now, you know, CCLI is allowing people to get a license until April 15th. So that's right after Easter. So for free. So you need to look into that about getting those licenses, and then look at the pricing according to your church size.
So I know when getting one for my local church, of course it's based on size and everything like you said, but I think everybody just needs to be aware to pay attention to some of the restrictions that even come along with those licenses. I think some of them even have, you can only keep it up for a year, your videos that are streamed and stuff like that. So just when you're signing up through the different websites for the different licenses, you know, you might not need both, but it's good, especially since one's free right now, to go ahead and just have it covered. And then when you're posting your, your videos or streaming your videos on Facebook or YouTube or whatnot, it's good to include those license numbers in your posts at the bottom, just to be extra careful, and just to be sure that people know that we are covering ourselves in our churches.
Yes.
Doing so.
And thank you, Stephen. That's a really good point. Just because you buy the license and you have that certificate, both the license for the songs and then the license for streaming, you've got to make sure that on your PowerPoint or at the end of your live stream that you produce that that license number. Also, you should have what you might think of as a bibliography. What were the names of those songs that you used and who owns that copyright? That is part of the CCLI contract, is that when you use those, you are giving credit to the people who wrote those songs, and you're giving credit to the people who hold the copyright on those songs. So you've got to include that to be 100% within the parameters of that contract and with the law.
Absolutely. So I think this next question is going to have a short answer. I think, so if there's only prayer, because some of our churches aren't utilizing musicians maybe right now, since people can't gather physically in the building, except for a small number, but some are. But if there's only prayer and a sermon being streamed, is there any need for a license?
Not really. If both of those are new and created for the purpose of that one time, there's no reason for a license.
Okay. But let's insert scripture, because I think there's some copyright or usage rights or whatnot about Bibles and different translations. So if you're using scripture, are there any restrictions there that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the scripture that we're going to put up on a PowerPoint so that everyone can follow along with the scripture reader is going to be fine, because it's under 500 verses. So RSV, the Revised Standard Version, and the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, those are the two versions that we have in the United Methodist Church. We also have the CEV. So of all of those, if you can use up to 500 verses and quoting that scripture in written, visual, electronic, or audio without charge and without obtaining written permission. But if you're going to use more than that, you do have to go and ask permission from the copyright holder. But also remember that nowadays your phone, you've got a Bible app on your phone. And so you don't really have to worry about producing the verses to be seen on a live stream, but people can follow along on the Bible app. But even for the audio part, it's got to be less than 500 verses. And I honestly, I don't think anyone's going to be listening for 500 verses, so I think we're okay.
Unless you're doing something very different than normal, but
That's a Bible church to the extreme.
how about that? Yeah. So the next question is licensing required for music played from the hymnal? I think we've touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of go more in depth, from the hymnal or the United Methodist Book of Worship. I know that the publishing house has put out a press release recently kind of sharing some of maybe reducing the restrictions on some of this material.
So, talking about the liturgy first, in terms of the liturgy, it's fine. You can use the liturgy that's there and without any infringement of copyrights. And talking about the music, that's where it gets a little stickier. So the churches, if you're in your brick and mortar church, you know, you've got the ability to use whatever you like out of those hymnals and songbooks because you bought them and you've made that investment already. Now, if we're talking live stream, which is what we're talking about today, you need to go to the CCLI licensing and get licensed to be able to use those over the internet. So that's a short answer. You need to go ahead and get that CCLI or onelicense.net. And onelicense.net is offering that free month of streaming license through April 15th. Now, let me continue. So, yeah. But there are public domain hymns that you don't have to worry about. And if you go to the Discipleship Ministries website and you find piano accompaniments in there, those are all songs from our hymnal and the Faith We Sing that are public domain that have accompaniments. So that you can sing to those, you can put those up on the web so that people can hear the accompaniment and sing to that in their own spaces wherever they are. But that's just a good listing of some of the public domain hymns that we have in the hymnal and the Faith We Sing. And then if you have a question about, is this public domain or not? The best place to go is hymnary.org. HYMNARY.org. And this is an ecumenical organization that hosts all of these songs that are from so many hymnals, but you can just type in the search bar the name of the hymn that you're wondering if it's public domain, if you can use it, and it'll take you to the page and you'll see there if copyright is held by someone. And then if you still want to use it, then you inquire about that copyright holder. And I've Googled copyright holders and gotten phone numbers and gotten right to what I needed to in order for me to ask about using that.
Awesome. I guess just, I think there's something about a Sonny Bono extension or something. I know that there's some dates. You gave that great link of Hymnary. How do you say that word?
Hymnary.org.
Okay, yeah. That's a great link to check as an easy quick check. But I think there's something about dates. So if somebody's just looking in the hymnal, yes. How would they easily spot?
Yeah. So this is pretty complicated. So this until January 1st of 2019, no hymns entered the public domain for 20 years because of the Sonny Bono extension on the existing copyright law. On that date, all songs composed in 1923 and before were public domain. But then on January 1st, 2020, all songs composed in 1924 went public domain. So next year, on January 1st, all the songs composed from 1925 and before goes public domain. So that's one way to check is the date. But you got to be careful because different parts of the hymns and songs can be copyrighted at different times. You might have a melody that is copyrighted and and it's in a trust for some family. And so, and they can extend that copyright, or you like this harmonization of this um, hymn or song, and the harmonization can be copyrighted. And then of course the text, that's the lyrics, the poetry, that can have a whole different copyright on it. So we can have a song, a tune like Beach Spring, which is an old tune, and with new words by Ruth Duck, which then the words are copyrighted, but the tune is public domain. So you have to look at all the parts of a hymn. And again, if you go to hymnary.org, that will help you greatly.
Awesome. I guess just as we wrap up today, are there any other final thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody watching?
Well, I've been delighted to see how people are really trying to find ways to worship together, to sing together, to share in this time of social distancing, but somehow we have really figured out ways to gather together. And I'm also so appreciative that people are asking the questions about copyrights and what is legal and what is not. And again, it's not just about legal, it's what is just and what is not. We got to keep our artists, our makers, our creators employed, and we got to honor their work because they help us to grow closer to God through their artistry. So I'm happy that people were asking this, and I'm happy that Stephen, that we had the time to address some of these questions. None of these questions are easy in that there's like one stock answer. It takes a little bit more work on all our parts to look up some of these songs or things that we want to use for our live streaming, but it's worth the effort. So keep doing what you're doing. Y'all are awesome.
I want to thank you, Diana, for sharing your expertise with us today. It is definitely something that is outside the wheelhouse of knowledge for so many people, myself included. So I've learned a lot just in this brief time together, and I'm hopeful that this has helped shed some light for all those watching as well that are trying to figure out how to lead through these times in our local churches in their various settings, and trying to keep services as normal as possible by maybe including music, even though their choir might not be in the sanctuary, or there might not actually be anybody sitting in the pews, but to try to keep it as normal as possible. And there are easy ways to make that happen legally and justly. And we've been able to share a little bit about that today. I want to also thank everybody else for being with us today. I hope that this learning session was helpful to you and your church in obtaining the proper licenses to live stream your worship service and other events in the future. I'm sure that many of you might have additional questions that either we didn't get to today or just need some extra clarification. So I invite you to email us at localchurchservices@umcom.org, localchurchservices@umcom.org. And I also invite you to check out the other learning sessions that are coming out that will be added to this video library. So thanks again, Diana, and thank you everybody for being with us.